Some families hide their darkest truths behind smiles and traditions. I thought I understood mine, until a hidden secret turned my entire world upside down. What you think is love can sometimes be the sharpest betrayal, and discovering it changes everything. Hey everyone, I've never posted on here before, but I've been lurking for a while. I need to get this off my chest because I don't even know who to talk to anymore. My family has always been complicated. I'm the older brother, Thomas, and my younger brother Derek has always been the golden child. My grandparents used to quietly point out when I was younger, but at the time I just thought they were being overly protective of me. Looking back now, I realized they saw the favoritism way before I did. Derek could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He got better gifts, more praise, and when he messed up, they called it a learning experience. Meanwhile, if I messed up, it was treated like a character flaw. My grandparents would sometimes pull me aside and tell me, "Don't let it get to you. We see you. We're proud of you." I think those were the only words that kept me going some days. At the time, I thought favoritism was just annoying. I had no idea it was laying the foundation for something much worse. After my grandparents passed away, things felt off. They had always been the glue holding our family together, and without them, the cracks were easier to see. I knew they had left behind an inheritance for me and Derek. They had been clear with me about it before they passed, even hinting that they wanted to make sure I was taken care of since I didn't always get the same support from my parents. But after the funeral, whenever I tried to bring up the subject of their estate, my parents would get strangely dismissive. They'd say things like, "Don't worry about money right now, Thomas," or "We'll take care of it. You just focus on living your life." At first, I thought they were just grieving and didn't want to deal with finances, so I let it go. Still, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was being kept from me. It was like everyone was talking in hushed tones whenever I entered the room, and Derek suddenly started acting different. He had this smugness about him, like he was holding onto a secret. I didn't have proof yet, but my gut was screaming that something was wrong. The actual discovery hit me like a punch to the chest. I had gone over to my parents' house one weekend to help my mom with some house repairs. While I was there, I asked about some of Grandpa's old tools that he had promised to leave me. My dad brushed me off, saying they'd already sorted through all that. Later, when I went down to the basement to grab something, I saw a folder sitting on the laundry counter with Derek's name on it. I don't know what came over me, but I peeked inside, and there it was, documents from my grandparents' estate. Pages clearly outlining that I was supposed to inherit a share of their savings and even part of their property. But what I saw in the later pages floored me. Everything had already been transferred into Derek's name. I felt dizzy. I read the papers over and over, thinking maybe I misunderstood. But no, my inheritance had been wiped clean off the books, like I didn't even exist. My grandparents had included me, but someone, my parents and Derek, had made sure I never saw a dime. I stood there shaking, folder in hand, wondering how long they had been lying to my face. I didn't even wait to think things through. I marched upstairs with that folder clutched in my hand like it was evidence in a crime trial. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The moment I entered the kitchen, I slammed the folder down on the table and said, "What is this? Why is everything in Derek's name?" The air went dead silent. My mom froze with a dish towel in her hand, staring at me like I'd just spoken another language. My dad, on the other hand, got that stern, defensive look he always did when he knew he was in the wrong, but refused to admit it. And then Derek, leaned back in his chair with that smug little smirk he always wore when he thought he had one over on me. He said, in the most casual tone imaginable, "Well, Mom and Dad thought it would be easier this way. You don't really need it, Thomas." That one line cut deeper than anything else. I don't need it. My grandparents had worked their entire lives to build that inheritance, and they had made it crystal clear that it was meant for both of us. This wasn't about what I needed. It was about what was fair, what was promised. I turned to my parents, looking for any sign of guilt, but all I got was excuses. My mom said softly, almost like she was trying to calm a child, "Thomas, you're doing fine on your own. You have a steady job, no kids, no big expenses. Derek's starting a family soon. He needs the stability." My dad chimed in with his usual bluntness. It just made sense to simplify things. Why make it complicated with splitting everything? It felt like they had rehearsed this conversation, like they'd all sat together and decided my role in the family was to be the one who always got less, who always understood, who would never fight back. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet. For the first time in my life, I saw their favoritism not just as unfair treatment, but as outright theft. The more I pressed them, the worse it got. Instead of admitting what they'd done, my parents started piling on excuse after excuse, like they were throwing blankets over a fire, hoping it would smother me into silence. My mom shook her head and said, "Thomas, you've always been so dramatic. This isn't about favoritism, it's about practicality. Derek just needs a little more help right now." Her voice had that same patronizing tone she used when I was a kid, and I complained about Derek getting the bigger slice of cake. Like I was being childish for noticing the imbalance. My dad crossed his arms and added, "Look, you've managed fine on your own. You don't have debt. You've kept a roof over your head without our help. Derek hasn't had that same discipline. He's still figuring things out." And then Derek, of course, jumped in with his favorite role, the victim. He leaned forward, sighing, and said, "Thomas, I didn't ask for any of this. Mom and Dad just wanted to make sure I was set up. Why are you trying to turn this into some kind of betrayal?" That last part nearly made me laugh out loud. Betrayal? That's exactly what it was. Only now they were trying to spin it like I was the selfish one for being upset. The gaslighting was so thick, I almost started questioning myself. I could hear my dad's voice in my head. "Why make things complicated?" My mom's, "You don't really need it." And Derek's, "I didn't ask for this." For a moment, I wondered if maybe I was overreacting. But then I looked back at the folder in my hand. The cold, undeniable paperwork. The proof that my grandparents had wanted me included. Proof my family had gone out of their way to erase. I snapped out of it. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steady. This isn't about what I need or don't need. This is about respect. This is about my grandparents' wishes. And you all decided those wishes didn't matter because Derek's comfort was more important than my existence. Their faces hardened. No apologies. No backtracking. Just silence, followed by Derek rolling his eyes like I was being dramatic again. In that moment, I realized something chilling. They didn't see me as part of the family in the same way they saw him. I was expendable, and that realization hurt more than losing the money ever could. After that confrontation, I left the house with my chest tight and my head spinning. I don't even remember the drive home, just flashes of streetlights and the sound of my own pulse pounding in my ears. It felt like I was watching my whole childhood replay in fast forward, every little moment of favoritism now clicking into place like puzzle pieces that formed one ugly picture. When we were kids, Derek got away with everything. He broke Dad's tools once, and somehow I got punished for not keeping an eye on him. At Christmas, Derek got the flashy new toys, while I got socks or books I never asked for. And when I achieved something, honor roll, sports awards, it was brushed off as expected. But if Derek so much as tied his shoes correctly, there was a parade in his honor. I used to tell myself it was just sibling dynamics. Some families are like that, right? But standing in my apartment that night, staring at the folder I'd snuck out under my jacket, I realized it had never been small. It had always been building toward this. Them stealing what was rightfully mine, rewriting reality so Derek could shine brighter while I disappeared into the background. The emotions hit in waves. First was disbelief. I must have read those papers 50 times, hoping there was some mistake, that maybe I was misunderstanding legal jargon. But the words were clear. My name was there, and then my name was crossed out. Then came the anger. Not the quick, hot kind, but a deep, simmering rage that sat heavy in my chest. This wasn't about money. It was about being erased, being treated like I didn't matter, not even in death when my grandparents had tried to balance the scales. And then, underneath all that, there was grief. Not just for my grandparents, but for the family I thought I had. It hit me that I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love and respect from people who were never going to give it. And that realization broke something in me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation in my head and imagining all the things I wished I had said. And in that restless silence, a thought started to form, a dangerous one. If they thought I was just going to roll over and accept this, they didn't know me at all. The next few days were a blur of anger, coffee, and pacing around my apartment. I kept the folder with me at all times, like proof that I wasn't crazy. Every time the self-doubt started creeping in, my mom's voice telling me I was being dramatic, my dad's tone calling me complicated, Derek's fake innocence, I'd open the folder and stare at the signatures. My grandparents had written my name. They had wanted me to have something, and my family had stolen it. At first, my instincts were all over the place. Part of me wanted to drive over there, slam the documents down in front of Derek, and let the neighbors hear me tear into him. Another part of me wanted to lawyer up immediately. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the legal side. This was about years of being pushed aside, silenced, and gaslit. If I wanted revenge, I needed to make it count. I started small, research. I looked up everything I could about probate, inheritance laws, and fraud. I even reached out to a family friend who worked in real estate, and without giving too many details, I asked about property transfers. The way he explained it, certain shortcuts and family arrangements could be legal if everyone signed off. But if someone had been excluded or their shares stolen, I'd get messy real fast. The more I learned, the more my anger sharpened into something else, resolve. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the powerless older brother who got the short end of the stick. I felt like someone holding a loaded weapon, not a gun, but knowledge. And then another thought crept in, one that made me smile for the first time in days. My parents and Derek thought they had outsmarted me. They thought I'd roll over and take it like I always had. They didn't expect me to fight back. That was their mistake. I started making lists, what I knew, what I could prove, and what buttons I could push to make them sweat. Revenge wasn't just a passing fantasy anymore. It was becoming a plan, and deep down, I knew, once I set this in motion, there was no going back. Once the anger settled into strategy, I knew I couldn't just charge at them blindly. That would only give Derek and my parents more chances to twist the story and paint me as the ungrateful, bitter older brother. They were good at that. It was their specialty. I needed to be smarter, quieter, and a few steps ahead. The first step was gathering proof. The folder I'd taken was a start, but it wasn't enough. My grandparents weren't naive. They had always been careful. So I went digging. I spent evenings combing through old emails they had sent me, the birthday cards where they'd written personal notes, even the voicemail my grandmother had left me a year before she passed, reminding me to use what we leave you wisely. All of it painted a clear picture. They intended for me to have an equal share. I also contacted the lawyer who had originally handled their will. I was nervous making that call, but when I introduced myself and explained who I was, there was a long pause on the other end. Then the lawyer said, "Thomas, I was wondering when you'd reach out. I had some concerns when I saw how things played out after your grandparents passed." That sentence lit a fire in me. Concerns. He didn't go into detail right away, but he confirmed enough. Things didn't go according to the will my grandparents had signed, which meant Derek and my parents hadn't just bent the truth, they had broken it. From there, I decided to test the waters. I showed up at my parents' house one evening with a calm expression, folder in hand. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. Why doesn't this match the original will? The reaction was everything I needed to see. My mom's face drained of color. My dad immediately got defensive, demanding to know where I'd gotten those papers. And Derek? He laughed. Actually laughed. "You really can't let anything go, can you, Thomas?" That laugh told me everything. He thought he was untouchable. My parents had shielded him his whole life, so why wouldn't he? He truly believed I didn't have the guts or the power to do anything about it. Walking out of that house, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt dangerous, because now I wasn't just the overlooked brother. I was the one holding the fuse, and they didn't even realize I was about to light it. The moment I realized Derek thought I was powerless, something inside me shifted. For the first time in my life, the balance between us tilted, not in his favor, but in mine. He'd spent decades getting away with everything because our parents always protected him. But this time, he wasn't hiding behind broken toys or missed curfews. This time, he was hiding behind forged signatures and stolen money. and I had proof. I decided the best way to get to Derek wasn't through shouting matches or begging my parents to see reason. It was through pressure. Quiet, relentless pressure that would force him to trip over his own arrogance. The first move I made was subtle. I let him know, without saying it outright, that I was digging deeper. A couple of casual texts about having coffee with someone from Grandpa's old law office or going through some files they left behind. Each time, Derek's responses got shorter and snappier. The smugness in his tone started to crack. Then I started poking at his perfect little life. Derek prided himself on looking like the responsible son, the soon-to-be family man. So I reached out to a couple of mutual friends, casually mentioning that I was confused about why Derek had inherited everything, especially since the will my grandparents showed me years ago said otherwise. I didn't accuse him directly, I just planted seeds. And sure enough, word started getting back to him. The next time we saw each other at a family dinner, he couldn't even look me in the eye. That was when I knew I had him. But I wasn't finished. The real turning point came when I scheduled an appointment with the estate lawyer and asked for copies of the original will. When the lawyer slid the papers across his desk, my hands shook. There was my name, my share, my grandparents' words in black and white. And when he leaned in and quietly said, "The changes that excluded you were irregular," I almost laughed. I left that office buzzing. For the first time, I wasn't chasing scraps of respect for my family. I was holding a weapon that could burn down the little empire they had built around Derek. And trust me, I intended to use it. It was one thing to gather proof, but the real challenge was facing my family without losing control. I knew I couldn't let anger rule me. I needed precision, timing, and, most importantly, an audience that would hold them accountable. So I planned a family meeting under the guise of wanting to talk about the grandparents' legacy and how to manage their estate responsibly. When I walked in, I noticed the subtle tension immediately. My parents were smiling, trying to appear casual, but their eyes kept darting toward Derek, and Derek was shifting in his seat, as if he already sensed the walls closing in. I set the folder on the table, slid it across toward them, and said in the calmest tone I could manage, "I think it's time we all look at what Grandpa and Grandma actually wanted." My mom stiffened. My dad cleared his throat. Derek's face went pale, and that smug mask finally cracked. I could see it, the fear, the panic, the realization that he was finally cornered. I started laying it out, step by step. Every forgery, every document that had been altered, every excuse they had used to justify stealing my inheritance. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I let the facts speak, and they did. My parents tried to interrupt, tried to gaslight me again, but I was ready. I had copies of every email, letter, and note from my grandparents. I had the original will. I had the lawyer on standby, ready to confirm everything. Derek started stammering, trying to come up with excuses, but it was too late. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by my voice stating, "You treated me like I didn't exist, and for years, you all thought you could get away with it. But this stops now." For the first time, I saw them all, the guilt, the shame, and yes, even a little fear. My parents had never been challenged like this before. Derek had never been outsmarted. And I realized then that revenge wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my place, my dignity, and showing them that they couldn't erase me. And in that room, for the first time in decades, I felt the scales begin to tip back in my favor. Watching Derek crumble was strangely satisfying, but it also shocked me how deeply he had depended on everyone protecting him. For years, he had floated through life thinking he could do no wrong because Mom and Dad were always there to smooth things over. Now, faced with irrefutable proof that he had stolen what wasn't his, that illusion shattered in front of me. He started with denial, of course. "Thomas, this isn't fair. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me." His voice shook, but it wasn't anger, it was panic. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Then came the pleading. I didn't know it was wrong. I thought it was fine." His eyes darted to my parents, hoping for some backing, but even they couldn't maintain their composure. Mom's hand twitched over her mouth, and Dad's face was red, not with anger, but with the unmistakable flush of guilt. I stayed calm, letting him flail. "You thought it was fine?" I said quietly. "You actively hid my inheritance. You lied, you manipulated, and you banked on the fact that I wouldn't find out. That's not ignorance, Derek. That's theft." He opened his mouth again, probably to argue, but the folder and the originals on the table were like a mirror showing him the truth he had tried to hide. The fear in his eyes was real. He finally slumped back into his chair, silent, muttering things under his breath, and I realized that for the first time, Derek felt small. It wasn't enough to just prove him wrong. It had to sting. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. Pride, ego, and the smug sense of entitlement he had carried for years. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be powerless, dismissed, and entirely outmatched. And in that silence, I saw something else too. The parents I had once depended on for fairness were now helplessly caught in the middle. They couldn't save him this time. They couldn't spin it, twist it, or gaslight me. I had them, and I had him exactly where I wanted. The realization settled over me like a weight I'd been carrying for years. This was my moment. My revenge wasn't just about the money. It was about making my family understand, once and for all, that I would no longer be invisible. After that day, I knew the next step wasn't just exposing Derek. It was reclaiming everything my grandparents had meant for me. I couldn't rely on anger alone. I needed a plan that was airtight, something that would leave no room for my parents or Derek to wriggle out. I spent the next few weeks meeting with a lawyer, gathering evidence, and preparing a legal case that was impossible to dispute. Every email, every note, every financial record was meticulously documented. I even secretly recorded a few conversations with my parents and Derek when they tried to downplay things, all of it building a web I knew they couldn't escape. Then came the psychological side of it. I didn't just want my inheritance back. I wanted them to feel the fear and helplessness I had endured for years. So I started planting subtle reminders everywhere. A casual comment to a neighbor about having to sort out the estate because of some discrepancies. A short text to Derek about meeting with a lawyer next week. The panic started showing in Derek's face almost immediately. He couldn't hide it. When I finally called a family meeting to finalize everything legally, the dynamic in a room had completely flipped. For the first time, I wasn't the one being dismissed. I was in control. My parents tried to negotiate, tried to charm me, tried to guilt-trip me, but it didn't work. I had the facts, the law, and the power. Derek kept his eyes down the entire time, and every so often, he'd glance at me like he was realizing for the first time what it truly meant to be outsmarted. And the look on my parents' faces? Sheer disbelief. The children they had always coddled, the golden child, they could no longer manipulate the situation. When the lawyer finally handed me the documents confirming that my inheritance was fully restored, I felt a mix of vindication and calm I hadn't experienced in years. I had not only reclaimed what was mine, but had also proven to my family and to myself that I would no longer tolerate being the invisible, sidelined older brother. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't just about making them pay. It was about taking control of my own life, my own narrative, and my own dignity. Once my inheritance was officially restored, the dynamic with my parents shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. They were quiet now, almost cautious around me. The smug, superior air they had carried for decades was gone, replaced by something fragile and uncertain. I think they finally realized that their favoritism had consequences, not just legally, but emotionally, and now socially. At first, they tried the usual tactics. "Thomas, we were just trying to help Derek," or "We never meant to hurt you." But I'd spent too many years hearing excuses, too many years being gaslit and sidelined. I could see through the veneer instantly. I didn't engage in arguments or debates. I just listened, nodded once, and let the silence do the talking. Silence that spoke louder than any apology they could offer. Derek, of course, was a different story. He avoided me at family gatherings, refused to make eye contact, and suddenly developed a lot of busy work excuses whenever we had to interact. My parents were stuck in an awkward place, too proud to admit they had made a huge mistake, too aware that their golden child had just been put in his place. It was surreal seeing them squirm like that. I had spent so many years feeling powerless, overlooked, and invisible. And now, without raising my voice or being cruel, I had shifted the balance completely. It wasn't just the inheritance. They had finally seen that I wasn't someone they could push around or ignore anymore. I realized something crucial during that period. Favoritism doesn't just hurt the person who's overlooked. It corrodes the entire family dynamic. And in my case, it had nearly destroyed my sense of self. But standing there, with my inheritance reclaimed and my parents aware of the consequences of their favoritism, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not peace yet, but the kind of closure that comes when you finally take your power back. The most satisfying part of the whole ordeal was seeing Derek finally face the consequences of his actions. He had spent years thinking he could skate through life on charm, parental favoritism, and the perception of innocence. Now, for the first time, he had no safety net. I didn't confront him with anger or yelling. That would have been petty. Instead, I let the results speak for themselves. Every time we interacted, I remained calm, composed, and unwavering. Small comments like, "I'm glad everything's settled legally now," or "It's nice when truth comes to light, isn't it?" were enough to keep him on edge. He started making mistakes, panicking in small ways, double-checking emails, stammering when speaking to family, even trying to subtly undermine me, and failing miserably. Every slip reminded him, and reminded our parents, that the era of Derek being untouchable was over. I also made sure the rest of the extended family knew the truth in subtle ways. Not to humiliate him publicly, but so that the perception of Derek as the golden child would finally crack. People started noticing inconsistencies in his stories, hesitations in his confidence, and slowly, the admiration that had once been automatic began to fade. Derek learned, in the slowest, most painful way possible, that actions have consequences. That privilege doesn't guarantee protection. That deception, no matter how cleverly executed, eventually comes to light. And I learned something too. Revenge isn't just about taking something away from someone. It's about teaching lessons that are unforgettable, lessons that make people rethink their actions without you ever needing to raise your voice. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much weight I carried for so many years. Resentment, disappointment, and the constant ache of being overlooked. My parents' favoritism, Derek's entitlement, and the theft of my inheritance left scars that went far beyond money. But through all of it, I learned something important. My worth isn't determined by how others treat me, and standing up for myself is not only necessary, it's empowering. Reclaiming my inheritance was more than just a financial victory. It was a reclaiming of my voice, my dignity, and my place in the family. I realized that favoritism and manipulation can make you doubt yourself for years, but evidence, persistence, and self-belief can flip the script entirely. I still interact with my parents and Derek, but the dynamic is forever changed. I'm no longer the silent, sidelined older brother. I'm someone who knows his value, who won't allow favoritism or deceit to dictate his life, and who can calmly take control when the situation demands it. If there's one takeaway from this mess, it's this: never underestimate your own power, and never allow anyone to erase you from your own story. Life has a way of revealing the truth, and when it does, it's up to you to decide whether you'll be the one left behind or the one standing tall.